I want to thank everybody for hanging with us as we enter our second debate in the Headline Circle Public Candidate Debates here in Port Orange at the Lakeside Community Center. This is the race for mayor, and there's no incumbent, and I'm going to ask each individual to introduce themselves and why they're running. And you each have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Henry. Good evening, everybody. My name is Don Burnett. I'm the city council person here in the city of Port Orange. I've been on council. I'm in my second term. I've lived here all my life. I was a graduate of Spruce Creek in 1985. When after college, I spent some time at the University of Central Florida, where I got my bachelor's and my master's degree. My wife and I got married, and we decided this is where we want to live to raise our family. And I think many of you all can agree that we've had a great community, and we have now a great community for family. And that was a conscious decision on our part to become part of this community as adults. Since then, in relation to my service to the community, before I even was on council, and to this day I'm connected in a lot of different ways. I serve on the Salvation Army Advisory Board for the last 12 years. The last 10 as treasurer. I've been very active in Volusia County Schools as my kids have progressed through the schools. I'm currently on the Atlantic High School PTA as vice president, and a couple other committees there as well. So, you know, whether it be church or whether it be the schools, whether it be volunteering for baseball as a coach or with Pop Warner for football, I feel very connected to this community. And I feel like that with my experience as a council person, my experience in business, my education, I think that I have a lot to offer. And I think I can make a difference in the city of Port Orange. And I hope to earn your vote on August 30th.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Henry. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lance Green, and thank you for considering me to be the next mayor of Port Orange. And she's known me since I was a little kid. I'm born and raised right here in Port Orange. My family's been in Port Orange since 1910. We've seen the growth and the allure of Port Orange grow for many, many years. Since a young man, I have always been a champion and a passionate advocate of Port Orange and where Port Orange is growing. I am now running for the elected office to fulfill the passion of our previous officials and our previous leaders to keep Port Orange what it is, which is a model city. Other cities around our state want to be what Port Orange is. It's a place for community, it's a place for raising your family, and this is a home. And so because of that, I want to be involved. Our country has come to a crossroads, and we're at a different time in Port Orange, and we're at a different time when we talk about law enforcement, we talk about safety, and we talk about our government. When we have situations like we have out there in Dallas and in New Orleans, those kind of things really scare me, and they kind of hit hard to me as far as keeping my community safe. That's one of my big issues in Port Orange, is keeping us safe and secure so that our kids can be happy and do the things they want to do. I want to fulfill the vision of our previous leaders. I want to fulfill the vision of the Riverwalk, and I've got 10 seconds, and I want to continue our way of life here in Port Orange, which is something that people are proud of. Thank you.
Mr. Knopfler.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ted Knopfler. And let me say at the outset, I am a plain-spoken man. When I finish speaking, very few people misunderstand what I have said. I'm in this race because we need to fundamentally change the way government operates. So here tonight, I want to tell you 3 things, and I want to leave 3 questions in your mind as we go forward. Number 1, Port Orange is a great place to live, raise a family, operate a business, and I ought to know, because I've been doing it for the last 26 years, right here in Port Orange. Number 2, Port Orange is all of those things, not because of its government, but because of its people. Indeed, Port Orange government has overcharged and overtaxed residents to promote special interests for 30 years. I'm running for mayor to effect the change needed to make Port Orange government more responsible, more accountable, to operate in the open, to live within its means, and provide necessary services that are designed to benefit the common interest. Now, I promised you 2 questions. Question number 1, listen to my opponents carefully here tonight and tell me if you can figure out if either of them are planning to change anything. And if so, what might those changes be? And number 2, while you're listening to them, try and figure out if there's a whit of difference between either one of them. And if you do, share it with me later. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started now. Mr. Knopfler, you'll have the first question. There was a lot of controversy about Mr. Ken Parker's exit with this water scandal, and you were one of the most outspoken people away from off the dais in the audience. Do you feel that ultimately the citizens are the boss, the city manager is the boss, or the city council is the boss? And why?
Is that all prefaced on the water debacle as well, or?
It's an example of the idea of power and control and accountability.
Okay. For all intents and purposes, the manager is in control. Make no doubt about it. Council may be his ultimate employer, but council has one tool in their toolbox, and that is the nuclear option. That is the only thing they can do is fire him. And beyond that, effectively, they have no control over him in public. Now, if anyone wants to start putting up their hands and say, oh, but I'm working deals in private all the time with the manager, that is not the form of government that we operate under. So your question, Henry, was who ultimately is in charge here in this city? For all intents and purposes, the manager.
Is that how you want it?
No, sir, that's not how I want it at all.
Okay, Mr. Green, I want to get on the record. I understand it might be self-serving and why you wouldn't bring it up. Your father is the current mayor, and he is leaving at the end of the year, and one of the 3 of you is going to replace him. I've known Alan Green as long as I've been in journalism here for 20 years, and I have an intense respect for the gentleman who's going in our Hall of Fame. With that said, do you agree with Mr. Knopfler on the control and responsibility and accountability of government?
No, I don't. And again, I'll be the first to tell you, as a resident of Port Orange and as his son, I couldn't be more prouder of what my dad has done for this community. He has put his life and his blood, sweat, and tears into one thing, and that was for his community. He also put in me the values of what it takes to give to your community. Now, in respect to Mr. Knopfler talking about secret meetings and hidden meetings, I don't know how it's a secret meeting if he knows about them, so I don't, he keeps talking about meetings and secrets, but I don't know what they are. We are in a city manager form of government. Mr. Parker, through his years of service, did a great job for a community that was growing. Are you going to have growing pains as a business, which the city is a business? Are you going to have growing pains? Yes, you are. Are we going to learn things? Yes, you are. Are you going to learn from your mistakes? You do that through life. So, did we have water billing issues? We did, because we are a growing community. Now we're selling water to another city. These kind of things you're going to have to obviously learn as you go. So with respect to our city manager, we are a city manager form of government. We as a council, our job is to set the policies of where we want to go as a city. We have one communication point, and that being our city manager. Tell him what we want to do, set the policies, set the vision, and let him do his job and monitor it. And that's how we should remain, so we don't have many different leaders trying to all have their input into things and get them diluted.
Okay, Don Burnett, there's no incumbent, but for all intents and purposes, you're the one on the dais here, our table, our lead table, that has elected experience.
Yes.
And you were around when this water scandal erupted. And it's not to say that Mr. Parker is a crook or anything. If anything, he's one of the most endeared, professional, experienced city managers. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I want to get that
Go ahead.
out
Yeah.
straight. Now, back to what I asked Mr. Knopfler and Mr. Green. Where is who's the big boss in Port Orange? Is it the voters by who they elect? And do they have a right to challenge government? Is it the city manager, or is it the city council? Or is it somewhere in between? And then you've got 2 minutes.
Well, in 2 minutes, that's an awful lot.
Well, I'm sure you'll do fine.
But we'll give it a go. I know Lance has had a great role model in his dad, and it's been my honor to be able to serve with him the past few years. My greatest role model in my life is sitting in the front row, my father. And I'd like to thank him for all that he's done for me, because that compass has helped me decide what's right, what's wrong, and a lot of these things hit me at the very beginning of my service on this council. Ken Parker did an awful lot for this city as it went and it grew for a long time. But what happens in some businesses, and you'll see even some of the best long-time businesses have issues because you don't have systems of continuous improvement. We stagnated. We had a lot of long-term department heads that were here that did very good work for a long time, but when you get into trust, but not trust and verify, and you stagnate, you have problems. We experienced a lot of those problems at the end of Ken's career, unfortunately. Those things ran a lot deeper than I saw at the beginning of my first term. It took a while to flesh all those out. I think that we've got a corner turn. Yes, we lost a lot of department heads. Frankly, we needed to, for different reasons. Some for different levels of competence, some for performance, and some simply because it's a different city now. We're in the 21st century, different size, different time, and it's an evolutionary process, but sometimes evolution has a little bit of revolution with it. So I think that we've turned a corner. I think we're moving forward. As far as the city council works for the citizen. The manager works for us, but the city council is a policy board. The manager's operations. So operationally, he's in charge every day. But when it comes to policy, it's the council. And the reason why I know that is we meet for a whole lot more than 10 minutes every week. Otherwise, we would have very short meetings and we'd send the city manager back.
One-on-one.
No, I'm talking about as a council.
Oh, when you're meeting in
When
session.
our city council meetings last hours.
Right.
And we meet 2 to 3 times a week. So we do an awful lot.
Mr. I'm picking on Mr. Burnett here, but he's the closest thing we have to an incumbent. He was on the dais when the water thing broke, I believe. Is that correct, Don? Do you hold him somewhat responsible as a county councilman? And do you feel like you and Mr. Knopfler, if either any of you were elected, would have to bear some of that responsibility?
Do I hold Don responsible for it? No, I don't. Again, city manager, form of government, you gotta be as good as your key people. I'm in the construction business, and I'm only as good as my electrician. I'm only as good as my plumber. I'm only as good as my framer. I can't do it by myself. But as the contractor, it's my job to lead the people, to put all the pieces together, to make sure we get the end result, which is building the building. Do I blame anybody? No. It was a mistake. It is a part of growing and moving and, again, taking Port Orange for 25 years. You have a billing system that had so many billing codes because we started dabbling into different realms of the water department. We're selling water to the shores. We're selling water here. We're selling sewer here. So these kind of things are part of the process of growing as a business and as a city. Ultimately, it is the council's responsibility to monitor the results and to see that we are maximizing our potential. Was it a scandal? It's not a scandal. I don't know why you keep calling it a scandal. It's not a scandal. It was a mistake. It was a billing error code that did not generate us a certain amount of money that was due to us.
Mr. Knopfler, would you characterize the situation where I believe one city wasn't billed for like 5 years, and the people that Mr. Burnett said should have been sent packing earlier with their 6-figure salaries? Would you say that was just a mistake, or would you say that there was more to it than that?
Well, let me put it in perspective, just give you a little bit of history on the deal. the September 30th, 2011 year, fiscal 11, was reported on, say in the spring of 12, March, April of 12. And the audit comments in that audit report pointed out serious problems with water billing. Their testing uncovered an unusually large amount of errors. Well, guess what? 3, 4, 6 months later, in September of 12, it blew wide open. Now, we can talk about policy this, policy that, but whose role was here? We had an audit report in front of us that council never understood. That's probably the cleanest thing. In terms of it being a mistake, it wasn't a mistake. Policies were not followed. When you implement new billing rates or new tax rates or fuel surcharge rates, they were meant to be tested. The program was meant to be locked, run our tests, satisfy ourselves with these tests, unlock the program, incorporate the changes, and lock it back up again. None of which was done. And it was done because of the people that were working at the time. Mr. Burnett is correct. They should have been chased off long before they were chased off. But here, what we're seeing is a smiley face. There's no smiley face here. 700 different rates for water and sewer in this city is silly. And what have we done to correct it? We've cut the 600 or 700 to maybe 400. But 400 different rates is incomprehensible, and that is not acceptable.
Okay, let's bring the mic back to Mr. Burnett, please. Don, because you were on the dais at the time, that's why I brought your name up. Defend yourself and explain what happened from your perspective.
Well, first of all, the elephant in the room is, do I bear some responsibility? Absolutely. Whether I knew about it or not, the buck stops here. I was fairly new in the position, and that doesn't matter. When you're in the chair, you have responsibility, and I accept that. And because of that, there's been a lot of hard work done since then. We did have a customer service manager who was let go because of administrative responsibilities that were failed. We did have a finance director that was let go, and we've had some turmoil and some turnover since then. We've practically rebuilt the finance department. So there are things that we have done since then. Water meters. We were not in an effective replacement program, and we've had to invest heavily to get caught up again where we should have been.
Well, let me ask you this. Mr. Knopfler has a level of responsibility and blame where he's putting the dime. Mr. Green has his level. Is there some in between where you put it? You took a lot on yourself, but like you said, you're policy makers. How can you interfere with what a manager is doing in a different department? Where the city manager is the boss of those people?
Well, and I can certainly tell you that Ken and I had conversations. I let him know exactly how I felt about all of that, both on the dais and outside of there when he was calling and giving bad news after bad news. You know, Ken, to his credit, was a great communicator with council, and he didn't hold back, and well, neither did I. But you can only fire somebody once. And part of the problem is when you fire somebody, their institutional memory goes with them. So you've got to go pick up the pieces and figure out where they were at and go back. So sometimes you've got to take a couple of steps back from where you were from a bad situation, making it a little bit worse until it gets better again. But yeah, I'll take responsibility. I was there. Absolutely.
Excellent. Nice to get that response. Great. Now that we've gotten the ugliness out of the way, tell us what you think is Port Orange's greatest asset over anything else.
Wow, that's a tough question. Our greatest asset, I believe, is the sense of community that we have here in Port Orange. I look at where we go now with the events that we have right here at the City Center, our 4th of July celebrations, our baseball fields, our softball fields, everything that we have in Port Orange. We have a variety of amenities in Port Orange. We have the river. We have, again, a great key development in restaurants, and we have a great sense of community in Port Orange that has continued to grow, and our residents grasp this sense of community and and become involved, and more residents become involved in their community as we go on. And I look at the amount of volunteers that we have that coach our sports, and the amount of volunteers who come out and do all the things that our family days and everything that we do. We have it's about the community as a whole.
Thank you. Mr. Knopfler, what do you believe or feel is Port Orange's greatest asset?
That is an exceptionally easy question. The answer is our people. For the most part, we're a community of God-fearing, law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. It doesn't get any better than that.
You want more?
Well, will you ask me another question? I'll do more.
Okay.
Yes, simple.
Okay. Don, what do you feel is Port Orange's greatest asset over anything else?
Well, and I think it's probably something that we can all have some consensus on, because we've got many wonderful community assets, but it starts with the culture of the city. And the culture and the heart of the city is its citizens and its people. I don't care whether you're 8 or 80, there's a place for you in the city, and the city has a place in your heart, in the hearts of its citizens. No doubt about it.
All right, Don, let's stick with you. Mr. Burnett, let's stick with you while the microphone is here with you. When I came down from New York to take a job at the News Journal, we moved to Port Orange. To us, it seemed like the greatest balance of commercial, residential, parks. I can't think of a place where the fountains are all coming out on the other end of the city. There's a couple of schools here now. What's that development out there towards prison?
Water's Edge.
Water's Edge. We were looking at buying there. Now, today, everywhere you go, there's like all these new restaurants and hotels. Where do you draw the line? We talked about that in the opening debate a little bit about development. People talk about taxes. Do you keep going with, do you annex more property? Where do you go with that?
Well, I think that's one of the difficult challenges as we move deeper into the next 10 years. Sometimes I feel like we're victims of our own success. We have a very balanced tax base. It's among the lower third in the county, and when you consider we don't have any beachfront property to help drive the millage rates down even lower, I think we're doing pretty good. But that takes a balanced tax base between business and residential. If you don't have a good mix of business, then during the economic downturn, you saw what happened in Deltona, and it was a disaster. The other thing is, in a quality city, people want to have shops and restaurants and retail. In a quality city, you want to have sufficient jobs. You also want to have sufficient schools. And we have A-class schools. We get 6 A-class elementaries, 2 middles, and 2 high schools that all differentiate themselves and do a great job. All those things help make up a balanced city. So when I say we're victims of our own success, yes, infrastructure and traffic. Could we have planned it better? Going back in time, knowing that Dunlop is our one main east-west corridor? Yes. And there are a lot of things that you can do about that, and there are a lot of things that we have in the works for it. Whether it be a modern communication system for our traffic lights on Dunlop that we'll have online after the I-95 interchange is done, whether it be more turn lanes, whether it be better feeder roads, more expansion. Those are the things that we're working on. These are some of the things that we're doing. But I think when you think about all the things that could be wrong with Port Orange, the number one thing people tell me is traffic. And if that's our biggest problem, I think we're doing okay.
Getting back to a historical perspective, it's my understanding these seats are all term limited. That's it, after 2 terms, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct.
Your father, Alan Green, the current mayor, has been on the dais for a while, moving up the chain with the council seat and then the mayor's. And I think a lot of people credit him with being the forerunner of a lot of this success. Would you be following in those footsteps, or do you see a different path? Do you feel there's too much development now, or are there pockets that you can still get more revenue?
That's a good question. Again, I go back to, I'm very proud of where we've come from as a community in Port Orange, and for people like my dad and Jim Ward and a lot of the older people that I know who had the vision of what Port Orange was supposed to look like, those guys did a really good job. We're in a different era now, yes, and to keep the tax base down, you gotta have a good balance, like Don said. We gotta have the right amount of commercial to go to the right amount of residential. You can't support a city and a city government off only strictly residential tax base. You gotta have that, you've gotta have that influx of business and good quality business that bring good jobs, such as Radon and the U.S. food plants and some of these larger ones and Thompson Pump and these companies. Port Orange residents don't want to have to go very far to go to dinner. We have enough right here in our community that satisfies a majority of the people when they want to go out and get what they need, may it be the grocery store, may it be the restaurant. So as a whole, I think we've got a good mix. Where we go from here is we got to think 20 years out. 20 years out, we're going to be we're going to face a lot of challenges. We're going to be more landlocked than what we are now. We don't have much more of a growing boundary, so we're going to have to be very precise on what we do with what we have left, and we definitely need to take a look into redevelopment of our east side. I firmly believe that the Riverwalk project is one of the biggest crown jewels that could happen to Port Orange, and to bring the spirit of community back to the river like it was when I was a kid. I look forward to it. So what I want to do is I want to continue the vision of our forefathers.
Okay, thank you. Just as an aside, for all three of you, it's been great so far. But I'm going to, before I get to you, Ted, I'm going to go back to Mr. Green for a new question altogether. Well,
Now, don't I get to comment on that last question?
well, looking about the, what was the question? Turn it off for a second. I'm ready? Okay, Mr. Knopfler,
Wait a minute.
response.
Okay. A moment ago, the question was asked and answered regarding terms here in Port Orange, and I believe it was answered as 2 terms, 8 years. Incorrect. The current charter says 3 consecutive terms. 3 consecutive terms. 3 times 4 would be 12. Now, what one gentleman has taken that to mean in Port Orange is that if you sit out for 2 years, you come back for another 12. That is a flaw in our charter that I believe needs to be changed. The word consecutive needs to go away. If we're going to go with 3 terms, 12 years, that's it, you're done. I personally believe 12 is too many. If 8 is good enough for our governor, for our president, it should be just fine for our mayor here in Port Orange. And Henry, that was really the comment that I had.
Thank you.
I couldn't remember.
I appreciate it. Now, Mr. Green, we're going to go back to the water thing for just a minute. If we can try to keep the answers a little bit brief, because we have a lot of ground to cover. As the water thing was unfolding, and there was a lot of coverage in the News Journal and the radio, and it was pretty much a big story. There were some that thought that, for example, Volusia tax reform, thought that Mr. Nostel was just golden in challenging the status quo and government to the point where he served on a special committee and looking at the issue and ways to, to move forward. While others were praising Mr. Nostel as a citizen's watchdog, others were saying he was a bully and a troublemaker and looking out for his own political gain. Mr. Green, you said that you thought the water thing was a mistake, some kind of, reading error or something. How would you characterize the rights of citizens to speak up, and when did they take, do you feel like in this case it was taken too far, or it was accurate, or where do you stand with that, Mr. Nostel?
And again, I've known of Ted for quite some time, and he is very vocal. Does he have valid points? Absolutely. If having citizens involved in noticing things that may or may not be correct, I think that's welcome. Do I still think it's an error? Yeah, it was a billing error. That's what happened. It's not. There's no scandal.
No, but I mean, his reaction to it.
So again, Ted is obviously outspoken. Is he right or wrong? I'm not going to comment on any of that. Obviously, presentation has a lot to do with things and how you talk to people. And that's one of the things I'm going to bring to the city. I'm going to bring respect to the citizens, and I'm not going to call people who work for me peg legs and disregard and disparage people who work for me. These are the very people who we are relying on to do a good job, and so communicating with people is very important to me.
Pass over to Mr. Knopfler. Ted, I tried to walk a balancing line with compliment and otherwise. How did you see your role during that tenure in holding government responsible? Were you on the money, or do you feel like maybe you went too far, or maybe not enough?
No, I believe I was spot on. We have something in this country called the First Amendment. And that First Amendment is there not to talk about the weather or baseball scores. It's to talk about very bitter, acrimonious differences we have in our society. And hopefully we can settle it verbally, as opposed to settling it perhaps with guns or bombs. So that First Amendment is sacrosanct. And I make no apologies for the criticism I level. And it was spot on. Look at all the collapse we've had since. All of that was there. The rot was there then. It's just people didn't want to hear it at that point in time. But now there's no denying the rot. And by the way, let me say that I will echo Lance Green's comment a moment ago. And I will not call people cripples from the dais or asses from the dais. Nor will I tell people to get their SHIT straight from the dais. So how about that as being my contribution, all of which takes place right now? How about that as my commitment to improving the verbal decorum, shall we say, in council?
Don, if you could pass the mic over to Don. I'll get it on that. If you will, in a second. Get on. Point it first. Mr. Burnett, again, you were on the dais when all this stuff was happening, and then when Mr. Knopfler joined this committee, I guess, Citizens Government Ad Hoc Committee, and I guess some kind of report was made. But I remember reading or hearing comments from you, the public, about he was overboard and making it personal, and you were basically the target of all that.
I took some flack because I felt like, as the chair of a budget and audit committee that made no recommendations to the council in 9 months to change things, just by talking about some things, I think some of my criticism about what went on at the time had to do with the lack of recommendations and the personal attacks. But that's what happened then. Honestly, I think Ted was speaking off the cuff because it means a lot to him. And whether those things were appropriately said or not, it came from his heart, and I can appreciate that. But that's looking back. Let's look forward. We've come a long way since then because we've addressed an awful lot of things. And I think that when you address things the right way and properly, a lot of the reasons why those things came out was because, unfortunately, we were transparent with our garbage. And it was there for all to see. So as bad as that was, as bad a time as it was at the beginning of my term, to have to start and see the turmoil that we went through, I think we've made sufficient progress in moving forward. It's kind of like a rock rolling down a hill. When you start, the further down the hill it goes, the more momentum it gets. And now we're starting to get momentum. We're heading in the right direction. And I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forwards.
Okay, Mr. Green, I want to give you the opportunity to rebut. You had a concern with what Mr. Knopfler was saying.
Yeah, real quick, and I just want to, again, reiterate on what Ted's point was about being called this, that, or the other from the diocese. I can assure you it was not from me. I have not been on that diocese, so whatever comes from there, again, has nothing to do with me. I can't help what happened yesterday, but I can help what happens today, and I can help what happens in the future.
Stay with the microphone with Mr. Green. Mr. Green, are you happy with Mr. Johansson? I guess Mr. Casella didn't stay very long, replacing Mr. Parker. But some people blame Mr. Knopfler for that, although I'm not sure that that's the case. What's your assessment of the new city manager, Johansson?
And again, I'm an outsider, I'm a citizen right now, and I look in. And what I see right here is I see cohesion. And what I see in our city manager is determination. And I see leadership in Jake. Being a military man that he is, and I think 35 years in the Navy, there's one thing I've noticed about him is he is absolutely firm. And some of the decisions that he has made and recommendations to the council, such as may it be taking down that rear 5, may it be moving to the end of the bench, down in a different seat. Those are the kind of things that he's implemented in his leadership, and I'm more than happy with the direction we're going with our city manager.
Okay, Mr. Nostel, Mr. Casella didn't last very long. It's Ken Parker's replacement. That may have been good or bad from your perspective. First, your response to that and your reaction to how you're seeing Mr. Johansson's performance in the first year that he's been here.
Yeah, before I do that, let me just go back and comment on this committee you keep referring to. It was an audit and budget advisory board, and I was the chairman of that. But understand that when you have a board, the chairman is not meant to be there making his own recommendations. He's meant to carry forward the board's recommendations. And if there was a sparsity of recommendations, you can look to everybody on that board. But let me tell you one recommendation we made clearly, very clearly, and that was that the city's bank account, checking account, checkbook, should be balanced every single month. Now, that was a clear recommendation of this audit budget board. And guess what happened in this last year's audit? We were told that the city's bank account is not being balanced. Shame, shame, shame. You asked about the Manager Casella. Manager Casella was a walking disaster. And the sooner the city got rid of him, the better the city would be off. You know, we talk about this form of government, this strong manager form of government. Well, there are a couple of buzzwords that come out of that form of government. One is manager in transit. The other one are lifesaver awards. Mr. Casella collected a couple of lifesaver awards. He employed a guy who didn't know anything about finance as his finance director. He was a failed city manager. He fired another failed city manager to be his utilities director, and he didn't know anything about utilities. So this manager form of government needs to be corrected somewhat. We need to pull some authority back to our elected reps. You asked about the last gentleman, the current gentleman, Manager Johansson. He and I see the world in a different light. His secrecy, his level of secrecy may have been fine when he was carrying the nuclear football for Jim. It has no place here in Port Orange. The latest buzzword I hear is strategic information release. That's in direct violation of sunshine. Once a public document is created, it's meant to be distributed if requested.
I can give you that. After Ken Parker retired, and again, I want to reiterate my admiration for Ken Parker's tenure in the city of Port Orange with that black mark at the end there.
It didn't end well for Ken, but he's still a friend of mine to this day.
With Mr. Casella coming in and going pretty quickly, your reaction to that, and then you said you want to talk about the future more than the past. What about Mr. Johansson's performance? I guess he's already proposed a budget that calls for a 10% increase. I don't know if it's taxes or spending or what.
9.1% increase. There's no way in the world he'll ever get by this council. No way in the world, because no manager so far, and I've seen 4 now, who's proposed any kind of increase along those lines has ever been able to get past my council, and we won't let it happen.
Has
now.
any of you on the dais here seen Mr. Nostel, Mr. Green? Have any of you on the dais here seen Mr. Johansson's proposed budget yet, in terms of what he's seeking that requires that kind of an increase? I'm asking these two first. Either of you? And from your perspective, what do you see as what he's calling for that's justified or not justified to carry a double-digit increase almost?
That's a tough question. Again, without dissecting, I can't go into specifics of every single line item. But you know, and again, you know, the job of him is to ask and to ask of this council, and then it's obviously it's the job of the council to decide what ultimately will or will not be passed.
And Mr. Knopfler, very briefly, is there anything in that budget proposal that sticks out, like, yeah, we need 20 more cops, or we have to buy 2 new fire trucks, or we have nothing left for reserves?
We need to understand as a people that the problem is government spending. That's where the problem is. That's what needs to be curtailed. Now, Port Orange has roughly a $70 million cash budget. 35 in the general fund, 35 million in general, 35 million in the
Okay, Mr.
private
Knopfler,
funds.
what I asked you was, are there any specifics that you see in that preliminary budget that stand out?
But
We'll get to that.
10 seconds, 10 seconds,
Okay.
and I'll be great.
Sure.
Now, out of that 70 million, does anybody in this room think there's not one thin dime that could be cut? $70 million worth of existing spending, do you think we could find a dime, maybe, that we could cut out of that 70 million? Jason is calculating it right now. Mr. Johansson didn't believe so. There's not one thin dime
Yes,
of
okay.
spending cuts
Okay.
within that $70 million. Now, if we look at some of the specifics within it, I don't think we need a garbage czar. We need someone who knows how to administer a garbage contract, but we don't need a garbage czar. We don't need a public information officer at this point. Look, if we don't get government spending under control, I don't know how we're going to survive as a people.
Okay.
We can't afford government.
I want to
I'm
go
sorry,
back to Mr. Burnett because I interrupted his couple minutes. Go ahead, Don, finish up.
Wait.
As far as moving forward, Mr. Johansson.
Well, with Jake Johansson, I think what we have is a very high-energy city manager. And we really did need a sea change in the culture of the city. We needed to get back to a culture of service for our citizens. And I think his high energy and the way he motivates and handles people has helped point us back in the right direction again. This is Jake Johansson's first budget. This is our finance director's first budget by herself without any hand-holding from the help that she got in the past.
Because the previous one was sent back.
Yeah, well, we had an interim manager to help her last year. And Mr. Casella, who started out rather well. I used to get weekly calls from him about what was going on. The communication from him just absolutely went away, and he was under a lot of pressure from our council because of things like that. So when he left, it was the right thing. I'm not the only one that made a bad call in his hire. I mean, Ted's committee recommended hiring Mr. Casella. So it is entirely possible for somebody like that to fool a lot of people. So
Ted, did your committee recommend him? No, just quickly. I don't want a speech. I just want yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. Back to Mr.
And I supported Casella. I was all in for Casella, and I was all wrong on Casella.
I think we all hope for the best, wanted for the best there.
Back to Mr. Burnett. Mr. Burnett, what is the current salary for Mr. Johansson, the new city manager?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure what it is. It's around 130, 140, somewhere in that
I
range.
thought it was like 150 to 160.
It might be a little higher than that, but I mean, this is along the lines of you got to pay what the market will
All
bear.
right, I'm glad you said that.
You got to pay what the market will bear. I'm not happy with that, but when you're looking along those lines, part of our issue is in Port Orange is I think we did so many other things on the cheap for so long. Water meters, a great example. Not having a replacement program because we were able to get away with doing things on the cheap because we were such a great community for so long. Sometimes you have to pay for performance. You have to pay a premium to get premium performance.
I want to kind of set the tone for the three of you now in terms of public spending and you know, what the taxpayers take the burden on. I took a look at salaries at the municipal level, and I noticed around 1996, 97, when we were in the middle of that big thing with the mortgages, where you could get a second mortgage for nothing, basically, and everything, the housing boom was through the roof. Nobody in Volusia County at the municipal level made over $100,000 a year. And then it started creeping in where the city managers were near $100,000 and the city attorneys were near $100,000. Mr. Parker, when he retired, I believe made no more.
He was the fourth paid highest employee in the city.
No,
when he
that's not what I'm
retired.
asking. What I'm saying is, when Mr. Parker retired, I believe he was either the second or third lowest paid city manager in all of Volusia County. And we're talking Hans Inlet, Pearson, Oak Hill, Edgewater, DeBerry, Lake Helen. why do we need to, in 4 years' time, bring a salary from 110 to 140, 150 and up?
You can start with that.
I'm with you, please.
And in Ken's case, I think we got a hometown discount for a very long period of time. He was the fourth highest paid employee in the city, and he's the city manager. To think that there were 3 people that had salaries higher than him when he retired. I think that after having Ken leave, and then we failed with Mr. Casella, and then, of course, we had an interim manager, I think we had to take a very hard look at what we were paying. We had to pay a market premium to make sure that we recruited good people. There are a lot of things going on in the city and all the mess that we had that we were working through that didn't help as far as being able to recruit good candidates. So sometimes, unfortunately, you have to compensate by making sure you pay a good, fair market wage. And as you look at the NFL, I don't think those guys are worth $10 or $15 million a year, but what are you going to do? Let the owner keep it? From an economic standpoint, they're worth what they are to their owners. So sometimes you have to pay what the market will bear to make sure that we get quality.
Okay, Lance Reed, do you feel that, as Mr. Burnett put it, you got a hometown discount on the cheap? Is that always the best thing? For example, Jim Chisholm in Daytona Beach, their city manager, he's hovering around $300,000 a year, twice as much. Jim Deneen, I calculated his over the last 4 or 5 years, and I believe he's a millionaire twice over. When does it stop for government where it becomes, they've got cars, they've got mileage, they've got, 3 to 4 weeks worth of vacation time? Where do you draw the line when people struggle to pay their light bill?
That's a good question. And so the response would be about Ken Parker is yes. There was a guy who committed himself to his city, and he did it at a damn cheap price. He wasn't about the money. He is not, if you know Ken Parker, you know a guy who just cared. And he was not necessarily all about his paycheck. He wanted his family to be in Port Orange, and he gave us a great deal for a lot of years. So then what happens is the economy starts to change, and the rise in the wages go up, and you got somebody at McDonald's going to make $15 for handing a hamburger out the window. Obviously now you got a city manager who's in control of a $130 million budget. You're looking at a different scale. So I firmly believe you got to, you do your exploration, you find out what the area is bringing, and again, things like Daytona and those you can't really compare. I don't think you compare because their council is a full pay position and their city managers. Again, there's a lot more different things in Daytona as far as the tourism goes versus Port Orange, which is a bedroom and a neighborhood community. So, but yeah, I think you gotta pay what the market will bear, and you're gonna pay for performance, and you're gonna have to pay for what you get.
Okay. Gentlemen, your responses are excellent. I just want to try to limit them a little bit more because we're running out of time. We have a few minutes left. Mr. Noftel, I throw out there for you the range of salaries, where Mr. Burnett and Mr. Green feel that Ken Parker's hometown discount made a difference. But some people can still say, well, just because you're cheap doesn't mean you're any good, or that it's a bargain in the long run. Penny wise and pound foolish. Or I gave you the other extreme of Chisholm and Deneen, and these are high-profile managers. Where do you see the salary structure, and how would you put limits on it if you're on the dais?
Anybody working in Volusia, that's all we got. Anybody working in Volusia County who's pulling down $140,000, $160,000, $180,000 is doing very well, very well. So my take on Mr. Parker was he was paid very well. That's the bottom line. Now, in terms of these other salaries that we're chasing, like I said earlier, we're either going to get government under control or we're going to have a serious problem. We're not going to be able to afford government. Every person that I hear, we were on the Bernier show the other night, 3 of us, and the question was asked, how are we going to fund roads going forward? And I honestly don't know how we're going to fund roads going forward. But as I left, a judicial candidate was on, bemoaning the fact that there's no money for the judiciary. They're operating on a shoestring budget. The sheriff candidates tell us that their deputies, they're losing them all to Orange County. They're not getting paid enough. But here in Port Orange, we're losing our people supposedly to the sheriff's department. So we're in a vicious circle with local government here in Volusia County. And if we do not get it under control, like I said, I don't know how we afford it going forward.
Mr. Green, the roads, bridges, development, all these things are the buzzwords that, you know, people either they want it for their improved area or they don't want something that's coming into their community because it's going to create more traffic or whatever. Do you see yourself in a role of policymaker? Do you see yourself in a role of, how do you see yourself in that role on the dais with all the stuff we've talked about tonight?
Absolutely. I do see myself as a policymaker, and I also see myself as the leader of the vision. You know, and where we go with our new development and how do we plan for the traffic. A majority of our development right now is going to the west side of 95. We have new homes slated for the other side of 95, and that already is a strain. Our underpass is not wide enough, and nor are we going to get any more. So we've got to look at other resources as far as getting roads to the west side, and may it be the city partnering up with some type of a developer to get the Yorktown extension completed, and or working with higher governments to get maybe off-ramps at Williamson Exchange or some type of other feeder roads or connector roads to get us to the west side to help us move around our city. We really only have one real main focal problem in our traffic, and that's the underpass at 95. And it's not going to get any wider. So with that being said, we've got to...
Can you get any help from DOT with that?
No. I'm pretty sure that the 95 exchange and the width that we have, they're not going to move. And they're out there expanding the highway right now, and it's not going to get any wider. So our problem now is going to get bigger. We need to think outside the box to get other arteries to the west side.
Mr. Green, sticking with you, and if I jump in, it's just because I'm worried about having enough time. You used the word that I was trying to get to, and I thought it was excellent. What would be your vision right now moving into if you were sitting on the dais, what would encapsulate your vision that's an overall theme? Not necessarily all solutions, but is it roads, is it taxes, is it accountability, is it parks and recreation? What would be your vision?
Again, my first vision as a city leader is again making sure that my people are safe. I definitely want my public safety is a big ticket for me. Our police department is depleted. Our public safety departments are depleted. Our fire and rescue, again, we can't keep employees because personally I don't believe that we're adequately paying our staff what it needs to and providing them the right training and the right tools to be able to do their job. First and foremost, safety comes first, and then from that, then I'll have the vision of community about the hometown feel. So I'm going to stick with safety first, and we'll go from there. And we'll grow from there.
Ted Knopfler, you've heard some of the themes here. Your vision going onto the dais, you have the reputation being tough talking, citizen watchdog, someone that truly cares about the community. What would be your vision in encapsulating that kind of point of view?
How about the vision that we deliver good government to our people? How about that for a vision? And that is probably my vision. I'm not in the vision business. Look at all the new roles we find for government. Government now is meant to be an economic, meant to create jobs. Since when did that get government's job? This vision business. This country belongs, this city belongs to the people. Let the people supply the vision. Not me. I can barely run my own life. I don't have the ability to run other people's.
Mr. Burnett, I think it goes without saying that the people elect their candidate who has a vision that they can share with them, that they feel is good for them. Would you say that a vision, this is a ridiculous notion on the moderator's part, or would you say that you need to have a vision going in, sort of a thing of where you're going, forecast?
I think you have to have a good assessment of where you are before you know where you can go. We have, as a city, our citizens have a lot of wants and needs, And you can't have more than you're able to pay for. So once you have an assessment of what your citizens want, what they need, and then you have an assessment of what you're able to pay for, then you go out and strike the balancing act of what you're able to do and when. As the mayor of this city, you need a consensus builder, because the vote of the mayor is no more, no less. But he does run a meeting, he does give instruction, he does provide vision. So you need to be able to have a consensus builder, somebody who can work with the council. And I admit, there have been times I've gone into our council meeting and been, based on the things that I've seen and read and studied, been ready to vote one way, but in the matter of debate and fleshing things out, I've changed my mind. And I think that's perfectly okay. In the light of information.
You
So
said
you need to
earlier
be a
to move
consensus
forward.
builder.
But what consensus building would be your thing? Is a vision? Or is it a way to get to that vision?
I think it's a tool to get to the vision.
But what's the vision for your?
The vision, I think, Maslow says you have to have safety and security needs before you can self-actualize. So, yes, absolutely. Public safety, we've recently been named the 7th safest city in Florida. That's not by accident, but you can't rest on your laurels. We know that we have the we're in the lowest third tier of how we pay our police officers. They're leaving. We've had a lot of retirements. We're growing as a city, so there are more needs. So you got to be able to assess those things and figure out how to pay for them, and to work as a council to build a consensus on that vision for the future, so that the needs of the citizens are met.
Could you hand it to Mr. Knopfler, please? Ted, we're going to go into closings now. We're out of time. We'll come back in the fall if there's a runoff. In order to avoid a runoff, one of the three of you, I guess, has to win 50% plus one vote. And if that doesn't happen, then the top two vote getters square off in the general election. With that said, Ted Knopfler, tell us what you believe are your biggest strengths or weaknesses, or your opponents. This is your closing. You have 2 minutes. Whatever you want to say.
Yes, sir. I am a change agent candidate. I firmly believe we need to change the way we operate government in Port Orange. Openness, transparency. How about assigning real responsibility and then demanding accountability back from these people that we employ? Those are the areas I want to focus on. We have a pension debt that is going to collapse this city ultimately. And there's no plan to get it under control. None whatsoever. I want to make clear to the people listening here in the audience and that'll see it later that I am about change. We talked a bit about the strong manager form of government we have right here. And to earlier candidates, you said, what is the role? The role of council can be whatever the charter defines that role to be. And I believe we need to move a little closer to strong mayor from where we are right now at strong manager. And a simple example would be, let's involve the elected reps in the hiring, the evaluation, meaning retention, and then ultimately the termination of our people. Now, some people think that's a radical idea. I don't know how to hire a police chief, I heard. Well, how exactly does a city manager learn to hire a police chief? And our current manager has never hired anyone in his life. He's worked in the military his whole life. So there's a lot of things we need to do, folks, and it's all within our grasp, every bit of it. Thank you so much.
Mr. Green, please. Your closing.
Thank you. My opponent here says he can't run his household, yet he wants to run your city. I can run my house. I've run a business. I'm a natural-born leader. I've been put in leadership roles since I was young. And providing direction is something I've done for a long, long time. I'm about positivity. Yeah, does change need to be made? Absolutely. But I'm about positivity. I do not want to go back and harp on what has happened. I had nothing to do with what has happened. What I am is the future. So with that being said, I want to provide my leadership, my skills, and my ability to run my household, to run your city. And so with that being said, I appreciate your support. My name is Lance Green. Thank you.
Don Burnett, you have 2 minutes to give your closing.
First of all, I just want to say thank you for hosting this tonight. I think any time you have an opportunity to address the electorate, your constituents, the voters, I think more access, more information for them is a good thing. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that tonight. I'm the only one up here that actually has a record of service. And you talk about change. Boy, in the last 6 years, I've been through a lot of them here. And my hands have been on the steering wheel along with 4 other people. And I feel like in the last few years, where the council has finally got their second wind, and we've worked very well together as a council. We don't always agree, and very seldom, unless it's an easy item, you see 5-0 votes. 4-1-3-2 votes are an indication that we've talked about issues and we've fleshed them out. None of it is perfect. Sometimes hindsight being the wonderful teacher it is, you learn from those, and that's one of the things that I've been able to accept, is that in hindsight, not all my decisions have been great, but I've got, because of that experience, because of that mature judgment that comes along with experience, I think I have an awful lot to offer. As far as looking to the future, I think that it's very important to have a vision and be able to work with your council to explore that vision and not be afraid to say, this, what we're trying now isn't working, we need to move in a different direction. That's okay. I have been fiscally conservative, and I think my record says so. If you take a look, most people are paying less now on their Port Orange taxes than they were before I came into office. I can't take all the credit for that. I think all of us in our own way have fought for different things. But if you have a safe, secure city with a vision to move forward, good things can happen. And I hope you're in your vote on August 30th. Appreciate it.
Do any of you gentlemen felt like you got shortchanged in terms of any kind of serious rebuttal? Or is everyone satisfied that we can call it a day on this debate?
I was referenced after I closed, so I'd like a couple of seconds to respond.
10 seconds.
I never said I wasn't a good administrator. I am a fantastic administrator. I have been self-employed and employed people for 35 of my 43-year history.
Thank you.
What I said
That's
was,
good.
I don't know how to run other people's
Okay.
lives, not run a government.
With that said, time and, you know, being put on the spot, you all did excellent, and we really appreciate it. I'm sure the voters. We're going to get into the next debate in 2 minutes, the county chair, but I'd like